Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Combos with Heroes podcast. This is Gino Johnson, CEO of Champions for Veterans, and I am really excited about today's guest on our podcast. We have an amazing American hero in General Butler, General Remo Butler, and I'm so excited to hear his story. He has a great relationship with my dad, and I am pumped to share his story with everybody else. But of course, before we introduce General Butler, I want to go ahead and say hey to my dad. Hey, Dad, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, son. You know, man, I got one of my favorite dudes ever. I mean, General Remo Butler. We go way back. He's commanded me twice, so we know each other very well. And no, we're not twins because we got bald heads. So I'm gonna shut it down, and we'll get ready to listen to General Butler.
Perfect. Yeah. So let me go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about General Butler. I know it's so much to share, but Mr. Remo Butler, General Butler, is currently the project manager for the Baghdad Embassy Security Force in Iraq. He has worked for many large companies, both in and out of the U.S. He has worked as deputy program manager for LOGCAP 3, a $5.8 billion project in the Mideast. Also was business development manager for KBR. He worked for SOC as Director of International Security and as Project Manager. He joined KBR in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom in May 2004, following an Army career of 29 years, which culminated as a Brigadier General serving as the Director of the Center for Command Support, United States Special Operations Command, MacDill Air Force Base, Florida. Brigadier General retired, Butler spent the majority of his military career in the U.S. Army Special Forces. Brigadier General retired Butler was born November 16, 1951 in Egypt, Mississippi. He was commissioned second lieutenant in 1974 with the U.S. Army upon graduation from Austin Peay State University. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science and a Master of Science degree from Troy State University in Personnel Management. General Butler, I'm honored to be on here with you, sir. Thank you so much. Excited to hear your story. Tell us about yourself.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I mean, like your father said, me and him go way back in Special Forces, and we both fought the same battles in Special Forces. Now, one thing you did make an error on, I am not working for SOC right now. I have a company called Black Lightning, and that's what I do, spend most of my time doing. The other time, rest of my time, I spend with my son. I like to go out, play basketball with him, and because he is my future, and that's going to be my legacy, is my son. So I want to make sure he has a good role model. And the other key, most important thing, is I am teaching him life skills as he grows up. Yeah, I was born in Egypt, Mississippi, 1951. Now, let me tell you a little something here. I am one of those people who should not have succeeded. Most people have no idea where Egypt, Mississippi is. It's about 40 miles south of Tupelo. When I was little, there was a blinking red light. There's no blinking red light anymore. The highway just goes straight through. But I went through there, part of the Mississippi education system. I left there, and my father was in the military. My father retired as a command sergeant major. His father retired as a master sergeant. So that's the kind of military background where I came from. Lived in Pennsylvania quite a bit of time, went to Fort Campbell, my father being stationed there, and I attended Austin Peay State University. Had no desire to go into the military. Now, you remember when I graduated high school in 1970, the Vietnam War was going on. So I had no desire. Well, as I'm in college and I'm finishing up about my end of my freshman year, early sophomore, this ROTC guy came by, and he's telling us all this good stuff about ROTC, and I'm like, nope, not me. Well, there was a fall in the economy during this time. We had a small dip. It was a pretty big dip. And I remember I went down to Sears one day, and I was going to get a pair of sneakers. And lo and behold, the guy working in Sears in the shoe department was my high school chemistry teacher.
Whoa.
And I'm like, what the heck? I said, this guy got a master's degree in chemistry, and he's selling shoes in Sears. Wow. So I put that in my mind. So I went back to campus. I had another friend who graduated, but he was there on the graduate program, working on his master's. And he got his master's degree and couldn't find a job. Couldn't find a job. Now, remember, I was in college, you know, I was majoring in wine and women, but I was smart enough to pick up that I needed a job. So I got to thinking, I said, you know, I want a job when I get out of here. Well, I went back and I thought about that ROTC thing. I said, you know, I'll try that. I went over, talked to the people, and they said, and we'll give you $50 a month. Well, $50 a month ain't nothing, but 1970, 72, 71, $50 was a chunk of change.
Right.
So I said, you know what, I'm gonna sign up for this. Well, I did sign up for it, didn't enjoy it, left it. Came back my junior year and said, you know what, I made a mistake. And they said, okay, what do you want? I said, I want to come back in the program. So they gave me what they thought was an impossible task for me. I said, okay, you go to summer camp. If you get less than a B in summer camp, we're not taking you back. I said, okay. I got an A out of summer camp.
Wow.
So I went back and everything was good, but PMS really didn't like me. And as it's getting closer to graduation time, and I think I had probably a 3.5 to 4.0 average in ROTC. So he couldn't really say, you're not. But anyway, right before the commissioning, he told me, now remember, we didn't like each other. He says, you know, I wouldn't want my son serving under you. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I wouldn't want your son serving under me either, because he's probably fat like you. You know, so that was my startup. So then, you know, I went in the military, was in field artillery, went through the course, went to airborne school, which back in those days was hard. Everybody said, oh, wow, it was hard. No, it was hard back in 1974. That's when I went. But anyway, I made it through there, went to Korea. My first assignment, brand new second lieutenant, full of vinegar. And I went out and I did the best I could. And I remember the day I got to the unit, we had a IG inspection. And for people that don't remember the old school IG inspections, it was a white glove inspection. The inspectors put on white gloves and they went through everything. So I was with my new battery commander, and there was another new lieutenant came in, and we're walking around. And as soon as the inspector would say, hey, you got a failure in your arms room, my new company commander would look over at me and say, Lieutenant Butler, your arms room is yours. Okay. We keep going. There was another big failure. Lieutenant Physical Security, I'll never forget. Lieutenant Butler, physical security is yours. Okay. So at the end of the inspection, you know, they say, we'll be back in 90 days for a re-inspection. Okay. So I set about to fix what was broke.
Right.
Did a great job at it, because I became the battalion expert on arms room security, physical security.
Wow.
I was so good at it that other companies asked to use me to help fix theirs. I did. Well, back in those days, we had a thing called a 6-month OER. So now I've got my 6-month OER. So as lieutenants do, we all got about the same time. We talked. And there's one guy, I remember, he was a West Pointer. We knew he was good. He opened it up and he got a number commensurate. There was another guy who was pretty good. He got an OER that was commensurate. Everybody knew I was good. In fact, me and the first guy were neck and neck. Everybody knew it was one of us. Which one was better? Nobody knew. We both were good. I got mine. I was like, whoa. And everybody looks at mine and went, whoa. And the XO says to me, he said, this is obviously a mistake. You know, you need to go talk to the old man. Well, shoot, man, I didn't want to talk to the company commander about it, but they pushed me. Now, remember, all these were white guys. They pushed me to talk to the company commander, battery commander. I went in, saluted, sir, this been, you know, what's going on? He says, what can I do for you, Lieutenant? I said, I want to talk about my OER. He said, I put a lot of thought in that OER, and I gave you what I thought was best. I'm thinking to myself, really? So as we talked a little more about it, he says, how did you find out about the other scores? I said, well, we were all looking at our OERs. He said, let me tell you something, Lieutenant. Your OER is a private, personal thing. You don't share that with anybody. You understand? I said, okay, but it's already down. So as we're about finishing, he says to me, he says, Lieutenant, I want to tell you something. I didn't give you that OER because you were black. The subject of being black had never came up. So now I'm like, whoa. So I went, remember, I'm only a second lieutenant, you know, less than a year, and I don't know. So there was a special forces captain there. He commanded headquarters battery. And there was another black captain there and some more captains. There was a very small base was in Korea. We all knew each other. So slowly these guys would pull me to the side, with no fanfare. And they would say, look, so-and-so stuck you. We've been looking at you. You should never have gotten this. You need to talk to the battalion commander. I said, okay. Well, then the special forces captain came to me and he said, you need to make an EO complaint. He said, because that's all this is. Now, remember, I'm a brand new lieutenant. I'm scared because that's my battery commander. But anyway, I did it. I went, made an EO complaint, and I filed it, and it went to the Vardy commander. So they did an investigation. So the Vardy commander flies down in his helicopter one day, pulled me out, and he said, Lieutenant Butler, we found some irregularities. That's the key word. And what that meant was he had talked to everybody there because I got most of them to write statements on my behalf. So he had talked to them and found out something's wrong here. But the battalion uses this guy as their physical security expert, their arms room expert, and everybody says he's a great officer, blah, blah, blah. He said, even the officers, his peers say he's one of the best officers in the battalion. He said, so I'm not sure what's going on, but he said, what we want to do is move you. And I said to him, not moving. He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't run. I said, and that's what that would be, running away from it. And he said, well, listen, I really can't protect you if you stay there. And I said, I don't need protection. I just need somebody to be fair. Right. And he hems and haws and he says, okay, what I didn't know was I had everybody in my hand, but I didn't know that at the time. And I wasn't smart enough to take advantage of the situation. But anyway, I stayed there and one of the company commander, the headquarters company commander, the captain, special forces guy, he called me one day and said, listen, Remo, he said, I'm going to tell you straight up. He said, if this guy gets the opportunity, he's going to screw you. So don't give him the opportunity. And I said, I don't plan to. Well, times went on and things would happen. And these other officers and these other companies and battalion headquarters would help me cover. If something was coming up, I didn't know, they knew I didn't know, they'd let me know. So anyway, I got the results back and they said, okay, from DA, said, okay, we've looked at the OER. So what we're going to do is your company commander said, battery commander said it's based on a score of this, and we're going to put that in. So now we're given a baseline for this score, which gives me an actual high score. But see, the data he was using was from 2 years ago. So they put that in there. So anyway, it basically got thrown out. But anyway, I made it through that. And that made me kind of bitter toward the Army. And
so let me ask you a question on that, because man, this is fascinating, and we get a lot of civilians that have watched this, so I want to civilianize it for the people to understand OER. He's basically getting an evaluation from his supervisor, and what General Butler is saying, he had outperformed him. And it's funny you telling this story, years and years later. We see that happens quite a bit. I know my son has had that issue in corporate America, but as a young guy, man. And look, and I know you. How did you control yourself and not just go bananas and want to do something? And what your emotions in dealing with that guy when you know he was messing you over?
Yeah, you know that, and you know me. And my first instinct was knock him out. But the other guys there in my unit, especially the XO, he was great. And there were some folks there, who kind of kept their hand on my shoulder, kind of pushing me in the right way. But anyway. So this passed over, I left, but I had this dislike for the military at this time.
Okay.
Couldn't wait to get out. I went to Fort Hood, Texas. And, things changed. I got to Fort Hood and I had what I consider one of the best company commanders I could ever get. Great guy. He figured, he learned pretty quick that I had something. Next thing I know, I was his XO. Yeah, we went to Germany for one of those rotations, and he got rid of the XO and brought me in, and he said, you're going to be the XO. Okay, I can do that. Then I had a battalion commander who was really great. He retired as a 3-star, and he knew, intuitively that I was good. So they started making sure they took care of me. And I went into special forces, and I went into special forces because of the special forces captain that helped me get through that first OER. I said, man, I want to be around people like this. So I went to the Q course, graduated, made it through. And before I went, though, this colonel was my battalion commander. And he was a shoe-in for 06. Everybody knew that. And he called me and he said, Remo, he said, you're You're killing your career. You don't need to do that special forces stuff. You need to just come back and be a company commander, a mechanized company commander. What I didn't know at the time was he had served in special forces in Vietnam. You know, he didn't tell me that. So, you know, go ahead, fast forward. I go into special forces, and you know, there's a bunch of individuals just like me, hard driving, self-starting. Nothing was too hard to do. And I said, man, this is good. Now, let me tell you, and you know this, because you were in SF a long time ago too. SF during those days, there was, I'm not going to call it a racial problem, but there was a racial problem. A lot of the NCOs had their own images of what Black people were and what we were supposed to do. And I didn't fit that mold. And I remember I went to pre-scuba, and I show up down at the scuba locker, and one of the NCOs says, what are you doing here? And I said, this is pre-scuba, right? He said, yeah. He said, can you swim? I said, this is pre-scuba, right? He said, yeah. I said, well, obviously I can swim or I wouldn't be here. And, you know, they kind of backed up and looked at me strange. And, but training was good. You know, now I'm gonna tell you, I flunked pre-scuba. Bobbing killed me. You know, and I'm proud to say I almost made it, but I didn't make it.
Right.
And there was a couple of occasions, one time, you know, alcohol emboldens people. They become more emboldened after drinking. And I remember one time we were at the Decade Association, and everybody was drinking and having a great time. And this one NCO, good guy, you know, we still communicate today. He was drunk. He came up to me and he said, Lieutenant, I said, yeah, Sergeant so-and-so. He said, do you mind if I call you the N-word? Straight right hand was my response. And, you know, people pulled us, you know, separate everything. Everything was fine. Then we were playing football one time, and there was a guy from West Virginia. You know, I'll never forget him. Good guy. We was in the huddle, and he stands up and looks over. He said, we're going to run an N-word go long. I jumped on him. So they broke us up. And one guy said to me, he said, why did you do that? Why'd you hit him? I said, because he said the N-word. He said, yeah, but he wasn't talking about you. You know, and I explained, it's not a choice to talk about me. When you say that word, it affects me, and I don't like it. So eventually, you know, folks started using that term around me, but they would still use it around some folks who would tolerate it. You know, and that was the thing, I wouldn't tolerate it. And
Right.
people understand what you will and what you won't tolerate. So I laid the gauntlet down, and there was a commander I had. He told me one time, he said, you know, you need to stop fighting so much. And I said, well, if they would stop saying the N-word, I wouldn't have to fight all the time. You know, but that was a cultural thing. That's how those guys had been doing business for years. And, you know, fortunately, I had a lot of good senior Black NCOs there, some good senior white NCOs, and they kind of explained to me the culture. And you know what? The culture kind of changed a little bit. Not a lot, but, you know, we'd sit in the team room and wouldn't hear that N-word. You know, I'd go out to clubs and wouldn't hear the N-word, you know, because they knew there was a price for doing business. But some of them never understood exactly what it was. They thought it was just, you know, something to say. So, you know, I liked the comradeship. And from my first SF assignment, my first assignment back in 1977, 3rd to the 7th in Panama, one of the guys I served with there, he was a white guy from North Carolina. He was the best man in my wedding. Yeah, you know, he's my son's godfather. Yeah.
Right.
And, you know, we talk all the time. And, you know, I still have a lot of people from that first unit, 3rd to the 7th, that I'm in contact with. And I don't mean once a year. I mean, we
Right.
contact each other, we talk to each other, we text each other and so forth. Got a lot of respect for them. They have respect for me, but you have to earn it. And see,
Right.
that's the thing. Nobody wants to give you anything. And when we were talking about diversity in SF, when I commanded training group, they formed a diversity council for SF, which I was on. And the goal was to get more minorities in SF. And I started early and I said, I think you're going to be disappointed. No, we're going to do this, that, you know. And I said, well, first off, to be in SF, you got to want to be in SF. I said, that's the key. I said, a lot of these minority kids don't want to be in SF because one, they think SF is full of old rednecks and Klansmen. I said, two, SF is hard. They don't want to put the work in. So I said, you got to look at all these things across the board to figure out how to do it. So we set up a program. We started having minority recruiters and so forth. And these guys were going out and they were getting a few, not a lot, but a few. And we started looking at the schoolhouse and the programs that we had and some of the tests. Well, most of the Black people coming into SF or trying out for the selection came from support and service support. They didn't spend a lot of times in the woods. If they did, they were in a van or they had a cool tent or whatever. So they missed out on a lot of land navigation. They missed out on a lot of tactical training. So when they would get to the Q course, this would hurt them. So we started looking at these things. Okay, what can we do to train these guys? So we started putting more training, because remember, we were called training group.
Right.
So it's our job to train people. So we started training these folks. One of the big things that we changed was there were a couple of big things. One was a swim test. I remember the first day, one year went out, and there was about 1,000 guys ready to go to SF, just ready to go. At the end of the PT portion and the swim portion, we were down to about 500. And most of the Black guys who showed up were within that group of 500 that didn't make it. So we started looking at them, and I came up with something I had to sell to the CG, because we always look at standards. You want to maintain the standards. And I said, these guys, they're physically fit, they're good. What would happen if we brought them back to Fort Bragg a couple weeks early, gave them swim training, and let them try it then? But there was a lot of pushback. One guy said, well, when I came in the Army, I knew how to swim. And I said, where'd you live? He said, I was from Georgia. We had a big old pond out back. I learned how to swim when I was 3 years old. I said, well, most of these guys don't have a pond in their backyard. I said, they come from an urban area. Now I said, I'll guarantee, can you stuff a basketball? Oh, no, sir. I said, most of them can, because the area they came from had 10 or 12 basketball courts, because that's all it had. Didn't have swimming pools. I said, all I'm doing is bringing them in, teaching them how to swim. Once they swim, first day of the Q course, they take the same swim test that everybody else takes it. If they make it, they go forward like everybody else. If they flunk it, they go back home like everybody else does. And that people are like, yeah, okay. Well, I'm very proud to say that out of that group, the first group that came through, we had probably a 70% of them finished selection and went to the Q course. Now, 70% wasn't a big number, but it probably was half an 18. And at that point in time, we were short SF guys. So that little bit did it. Then we started looking at things into the phase 1 and selection. A lot of times we would have people go out in the middle of the woods and look for what I call a stick.
Right.
I've been in SF a long time. I can't remember going into the woods looking for a stick.
Right.
And that's what we do. We'd have this stick out in the middle of the woods with a number on it. The guys had to find that stick. And well, it's land nav. It is land nav, but it's in the woods looking for a stick. I mean, one time I walked within 5 feet of that stick and missed it.
Right.
So we looked at that and said, what, most times when we have an SF mission, there's something there. There's a crossroads that we can focus on, a church, a school, something large, or streets, roads crossing, intersections, something. So we started changing it. Guess what? We started getting more graduates. Now, did that do anything to the standards? No. But did it help the force overall? Yes, it did. The good thing is, I had a reputation where when I would speak, people tend to listen. And when I briefed the CG about it, he said, you know what? That's a good idea. Plus, I went out and I co-opted some of the old retired sergeant majors who worked in the course. And they were in complete agreement with me. So what we had to do, we had to form a collaboration and get this stuff done. But what we did was we got more people into the force without losing the quality of people that were going into the force. And that was the whole thing. The selection went well. The recruiting went well. Now, we had guys come by and say, oh, so-and-so, he was racist. He didn't like me. Okay. Well, I guess nobody on your class liked you because you got peered last. We had to watch people who want to game the system. And we took all that out. But at the end of the day, it all worked fairly well. One of the big things.
Let me say this, sir, because a lot of people watch this and won't understand. When we're talking about General Butler, and he mentioned a few things, but I want to make sure I bring this up. When you talk about special forces, when we were in, and I retired in 2000, I always tell people you could count the Black men on one hand that was in your group. You count the Black officers on one fingertip. You can count the commanding Black officers on the tip of your finger. It was really, and I know, and I'm not making light of that. I'm telling you how rare it is, and it was for General Butler to be a commander of any kind in special forces. And if people understand what you had to go through to get to that, and I know you wasn't bringing that up, but as somebody served under you, I wanted to make sure I brought that up because it's just very rare. So you made it, and special forces is the top of the top. And so to go up and matriculate in that area, it had to be something. Now, look, tell me this, talk a little bit about, and I want to hear this part of it, if you don't mind, sir. Take me back just to what it took for you to even to believe you could become a commander once you got in this pretty much all white environment and you had to compete. Just give me your mindset a little bit on that part, if you don't mind.
Well, my mindset was this: you couldn't beat me. I was good. I knew I was good. I knew what I deserved. And I was very vocal in telling people what I thought I deserved. And I was very vocal in asking, why didn't I get this job? Tell me what Smuckatelli had that I didn't have. And a lot of times that would cause people to go, they were stuttering. Okay, don't stutter to me. If you tell me this guy did this, he's this, he's that, that's fine with me. But don't just make an arbitrary decision. And I would not accept arbitrary decisions. So that's how I went. When I, and the funny thing about it is, I remember in '77 when I went through, I didn't think I was anything special. In fact, my goal was to retire as an 05. That was my goal.
Wow.
Never said battalion commander. I said my goal was to retire as an 05 because I thought that was the limits. And I didn't realize at the time how people were looking at me. But I after I made a general, a lot of the old guys that I served with when I was a lieutenant and a captain and a major told me, we knew you were going to be a general one day. So how'd you know? I didn't know, and they knew that. And like I said, I always went forth to do the best job I could. The other thing I would do, I would always go after the hard jobs. Okay. I remember I came to Fort Bragg back in 1982 or 3. And I was assigned to SOCOM, which was new then. And the commander of SOCOM, the deputy commander, knew I was coming back and he assigned me to one of the groups, 7th group. So I went to 7th group and everybody's looking, you know how it is. And I said, who's this guy? Why is he here? Oh, so he told me he's coming here. Okay. He's, whatever. But anyway, I did the hard jobs. When I got there, again, I was a rutabaga and the commander relieved the S3 and made me his S3. Now he did that at this time. I don't know if you remember when we were doing those deployments to Honduras every 30 days.
Right.
I forgot what that was called. Anyway, I'll think of it later. But anyway, we were doing 6 weeks to Honduras and then come back for a month and then go back for another 6 weeks. Did 7 of those. Wow. Volunteered to stay there and do them. And, if there was a hard mission coming up, I would volunteer for it. I'll do it. Now you sacrifice a lot. You don't realize what you're sacrificing, but you're sacrificing that family time. But anyway, I was always volunteering for the hard jobs and, I was doing hard things. And that's one of the things that people notice. So, oh man, it don't matter what it is, he'll do it. And they get to see that you have that can do, will do attitude. So people respect that. Now, here's the thing about SF. The commander is the commander. The commander wants people that's going to make him look good. So once the commander says, man, Butler's my S3, man, he's doing a hell of a job for me, I don't, then other commanders will look at you and they go, ooh, how can I get this guy in my unit? How can I get this guy in my unit? Or, can I borrow him and do this? So, I did that and I maintained that throughout. I also made lasting what I call relationships. Okay. We talk about right now, they say Sunday is the most segregated day in the States. Well, in SF, we had teams and the team was the backbone of the family. You were closer with your teammates than you were with the family. So that created a group atmosphere where everyone knew each other and they took care of each other. Make sense? So that was one of the things, I'm like, wow. So people knew me that I didn't know because they had heard from this guy that Butler knows what he's doing. So we did that. went to Just Cause, and I was helping on the right of Blue Spoon. And, I got a pretty good reputation out of that. And the good part about that is, you remember I told you about that battalion commander I had who told me not to go SF?
Right.
Now, this battalion commander is now the commander of USA SOC.
Wow.
Yeah, the 3-star. So he came down to Panama, gave me an award, and we're standing in line, and he was glad to see me. And he says to me, he said, congratulations. And I leaned over and I said, sir, I didn't make a bad choice after all, did I? We had a good chuckle about that. But when it was time to leave and go back, well, guess who was instrumental in where I went back to? Yeah, exactly. So, that's how you kind of make your reputation. And, one thing I want to say about SF, I'm not stupid enough to say that there isn't racism in SF, but I will say there's not a lot. And one of the things that I always remember, and you remember when I was in training group,
Right.
I heard my secretary out one day, or as they call her now, my admin assistant, and she was telling somebody, she said, yeah, General Butler's in this office. Well, that particular day, the air conditioner was out. So I had my shirt off, had my green t-shirt on, had my windows open. And this guy looked in the office, peeped around, went back out. And I heard him say, no, not here. And she said, I know he's in there. He didn't go nowhere. So the guy looked in again, saw me, waved, I waved, he came back. Miss Clifford got up. He said, Miss Clifford, there's no Colonel Butler in here. Miss Clifford got up, walked in there, and she said, here's Colonel Butler. And guy came in, he was like, wow, you're Colonel Butler. Ah. So I said, yeah, I said, sit down here for a minute, I'll be back. I came back about an hour later. Yeah, let him know. So I came back and I walked in and I said, you weren't expecting somebody black, were you? And he goes, not really, sir. And I've had that happen several times, which tells me that in SF, you get a reputation. At many points in time, they're going to say black guy. But some point in time, they stop referring to you and just refer to you as Lieutenant Butler, Captain Butler, whatever Butler, like you. I heard about you and, I said, oh, you need to meet Sergeant First Class Johnson, and I usually knew when somebody told me I need to meet that meant it was somebody black. It was good.
Right.
So I remember the first time I met you, after they told me, need to meet Sergeant Johnson, nobody told me Black Sergeant Johnson, but they said Sergeant Johnson, but I figured that out. And there have been several folks, we've talked about this, who become Master Sergeant, Team Sergeant, so-and-so, it kind of passed that race thing in SF, but you got to be on your P's and Q's to do that. You got to be, as we say, righteous to do that, and that's one of the things I know about you. You were team daddy. Nobody said, oh, the Black Team Sergeant, Master Sergeant Johnson's team. I know that. So, there were those things, and there were the intangibles. And there was a couple times, that I would meet a white officer and they'd say, oh, this is Colonel Butler. Look, you could tell they were shocked. And, I said, you weren't expecting black, were you? Well, not really, sir. Because people have you stereotyped. They look at you and figure what mold you should be in. And here's the other thing that gets me all the time. Wow, you're very articulate. Or you speak really well. One time I had retired, and there was this Air Force guy. He was a retired colonel, and his company called me for a job interview. I went up for the job interview. Now, remember, the Air Force colonel is the one who recommended me. So I go for this job interview. We sit at a big, long table, and I remember this table had about 20 people around it. There's one black guy at the end of the table, and they were questioning me. We had been going through questions for about an hour. And it's almost over. And this one guy asked me, he said, well, Colonel, no, I was General, I retired. General, what, tell me why we should hire you. And I looked at him and I said, well, we've been talking about this for over an hour. If you don't want to hire me after this hour, you don't need me. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Like I said, you got to call people sometime. And of course, they hired me, and I had a great time working for the company. But I remember we were riding back to the airport because I had a flight to catch. And the guy who recommended me, we're in his car, we're riding back to the airport, and he's looking at me. He says, General, I didn't realize you were that articulate. And I looked at him, I didn't say anything. Now here's the other thing. My son, who you met earlier, he's 12. He's very, very smart. He's smarter than I was at 12. He speaks English, just like me and you do, and your son.
Yes, sir.
We'll go somewhere, and the first thing people want to say is, wow, he speaks very well, or he's very articulate. And sometimes I mess with him. I said, well, what do you think he's going to go? You see what I'm saying? I said, my son speaks English. So, like I said, there's still stereotypical stuff out there, but you have to put yourself in a position where you go over that stereotypical stuff. They look at you and they stop the stereotype.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, this is a phenomenal conversation. I want to take you to a day that I will never forget. And I looked at my Special Forces memorabilia this morning, and I found this program when a Colonel Remo Butler got promoted to general. And it's dated, I'm going to read just a little bit, 4 o'clock, 9 June 2000, John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center. And I sit in the back of this room and watch my hero get promoted to general. And what people won't know is General Butler was the first Black man in Special Forces to make general. Let me slow down a little bit, because I want this to kind of simmer a little bit like we're cooking a gumbo. I'm in South Louisiana. In the history of our country, we've had incredible American heroes. You're looking at right now the first Black man to make general, be a general officer in Special Forces. And when we talk about Special Forces, we know the John Wayne movie, the Green Berets and all that, and Rambo. You're talking to a real American hero. And I sit in the back of, I'll never forget sitting there watching you get promoted, sir, with tears in my eyes. Because the pride that I felt that day and serving under you twice, and then watching you in foreign countries and going on missions with you, I'm almost tearing up right now. It was incredible. It was incredible, because I'd never seen that, and no one else had ever seen what happened that day at John F. Kennedy Auditorium. So, man, just take me to that moment when you stood there and got the star. Just talk about that if you want.
That was a very special moment for me, because Special Forces became a branch, I believe, in 1985. And that was in 2001?
Yes, 2000.
Yeah,
2000.
2000. Yes. And look how many years that was. And there's never been a Black Special Forces general, from 1985 to 2000. Wow. That's what, I forgot how many years that is, but that's a lot of years. And I was the first. What made me extremely proud was, like I said, my father was at my promotion. My father was a retired command sergeant major. And, for him, that was icing on the cake. When I was younger, and when I made a lieutenant colonel and I commanded, my father, having, being in the Army, knew that I was going further. And my father used to always say to me, he said, son, he said, if you ever get selected to be a colonel and go to the War College, he said, my dreams are done. My dreams are done. Because that's all he knew. He never saw a real live Black general, and he was a sergeant major, a command sergeant major. And, so he was very, very proud of his son. And a lot of the people he worked with, told him, how proud he should be. As a son, when you can do something that makes your father proud, that makes you doubly proud. And I was proud also for the number of, I became a role model for a lot of Black people, because now they see, I too can achieve this one day, or man, I'm not going to work that hard. I don't want to do that. But I showed what was possible. It's kind of like Barack. He showed it's possible for a Black man to get elected president. I showed it's possible for a Black man to become a general officer in Special Forces. Now, it took another 20 some years before the next one came. Well,
wow.
15, it was about 15 years, 15, 16 years before the next one came. And that was in 2016 or 17, I think. I forgot what year. But anyway, the next one came by.
That's incredible. Yeah,
and I mean,
go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
I had my first sergeant when I had my first infantry company. He was there. He was a retired sergeant major too. And these were guys who had worked for me when I was younger, when I was a captain. They knew me. They knew who I was. And they were all proud of me because one, I was true to myself. I never changed. They said, one thing, Captain Butler, General Butler, it's still the same thing. So I was very proud of that.
what people don't realize, we lift weights together. And
Yeah.
my wife started laughing. I told my wife, I'm gonna see General Butler and get him on the car. She said, the bandana in the weight room, General Butler. And what people don't realize, General Butler will be in the weight room with his music going, lifting heavy weights. He always lifted weights with a bandana on. This shows y'all know this man, right? And he had a bandana on, and you go in the weight room at Fort Bragg, and you look in the corner, and he was bench pressing heavy weights and listening to music and doing. And yeah, I said, when you go in a weight room, you don't know who people are because everybody's in their civilian clothes, and no one would know at that time he was maybe, you know, he was a full bird colonel, or he was a general, because he'd still be the same guy in there lifting weights and working out like we did in Honduras or whatever. And that's the love and respect I know his troops have for him, because when you see him somewhere, he's still working out, he's still training, and he's not going, hey, I'm General Butler over here in the corner working out. I'm just another soldier in the gym working out. So my wife even remembers seeing you with the bandanas on in the gym working out.
Yep.
That's awesome. I got a question for you, General
Yeah.
Butler. Man, you know, as a civilian, man, it's amazing just to see what you've done. But I got a question for you. What does it take? What would you say it takes to become a general in the Army like that? Like, what does
First thing is luck. Number two, you have to have some high level mentors who are pushing you. You know, now, before that comes, you have to, one, have a great work ethic. And the other one is you have to complete missions in a good way. Because once you start doing that, completing your missions, working hard, making other people look good, then you become recognized.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Mentorship, just really.
Yeah, let me tell you about mentorship.
Mhm.
And I did one of these a while back, and I told somebody, I said, in all my time in the military, 29 years and some months, I never had a Black mentor.
Mm.
My first mentor was Colonel Sidney Shacknow, who later became General Sidney Shacknow. The other one is Lieutenant General retired Wild Bill Tagney. He was one of my mentors. Harley Davis was one of my mentors. 3-star retired General J.T. Scott. These guys mentored me. And sometimes mentoring was painful, but they told me the truth and they pushed me in the right way. Now, here's another thing that's going to really shock you. A lot of senior NCOs mentored me. And I remember, you know, there was a Sergeant Major Bone who mentored me. Sergeant Major Rambo mentored me. And I remember one time I was in SWIC and I was downstairs and I was just talking to Sergeant Major Rambo and Sergeant Major Bone. And they were looking, I was on the wall where the commanders of SWIC were. And Sergeant Major Rambo said to me, he said, Colonel, you know, one day your picture's going to be up here. And I said, no, I doubt that very seriously. And Sergeant Major Rambo said, no, sir, really, I think that. Sergeant Major Bone said, yeah. But then Sergeant Major Bone said, there's one thing different about you and these guys on this wall. And I looked at him and I said, they're all white. And he said, no, they don't have a mustache. And I said, yeah, you're right. I said, that's why I won't be on that wall. But, you know, but these are guys who tried to mentor me and push me in the right direction.
Yeah, it's amazing you mentioned those two guys, and I know them very well. And both Sergeant Major Bone and Sergeant Major Rambo mentored me also, and I mean, so I know them very well, man. The amazing part. Now, I read a letter that you wrote to the War College, I believe.
It was a paper.
A paper,
yeah.
And I just wrote a note as you were talking. Let me say a little bit. I want you to talk about this because General Butler was instrumental in changing the mindsets and leadership when it came to Black officers and getting mentors. And I read that paper, okay? And just talk a little bit about it, just so that people understand what that was and what it is.
Well, if anybody wants to read it, all you have to do is go on Google, type my name in, and type War College paper, Why Black Officers Fail. Or just go to Google and type in Why Black Officers Fail. One day when I was in the War College, I was sitting around and we were looking at the class. And there were 200 and some folks in the class. And I think we had 21 or 22 Black members of the class, and Black and minority. And we were talking, man, I wonder, why isn't there more? Why? And we started talking about the guys who we felt were compatible with us, who had got dropped along the wayside. And at the War College, you have to write a paper. And, I said, okay, maybe I'll write a paper on why Black officers fail. And that was I didn't realize at the time, a touchy subject. So my class proctor, one of my class proctors, I told him what I wanted and asked would he be my mentor with it. Is, oh, well, I'd love to, but, I have too many already. And he says, why don't you go and talk to Dr. Nagami? And Dr. Nagami was Dr. Glenda Nagami. She's now retired in Hawaii, and me and her speak monthly. Of course, by the last name, you can tell she's of Japanese ancestry. So I went to her and explained what I'd like to do. And she says to me, she said, let me explain something to you. She said, a while back, there was an MP colonel who wrote a paper kind of on the same thing. And once he wrote the paper, got turned in, he got rifted. And I said, well, ma'am, I think my file is too strong to get rifted, and I'm willing to take the chance. She said, I'm just being honest with you. If you want to take the chance, I will help you. So we wrote it, and a lot of people wrote esoteric papers about war on Mars in 2030, or waking up from the nuclear nightmare in 2050. And but I wrote something that I felt could help today. So I wrote that, and I started doing research. And I went back to the early 1900s when you had a few Black officers in. And some of the comments that senior officers had said about them. Well, I remember one distinct comment. There was one officer, and the officer wrote, he's very good, and he has a lot of white blood in him, which, I guess that equated to making him good. There was others who said, well, Black folks don't learn as fast. They're not as smart. They don't exhibit leadership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I looked at that, and I started thinking about it. And then I started looking at jobs. If you go to a regular unit and you look at the S3 and S1, critical jobs like that, staff jobs, especially the S3, you don't see many Black folks in them. They're always the S4, the EEO officer. Let's not forget that. And at the War College, we were having we had a outside speaker come in. Not going to tell you what his rank was or his job, but he was very senior in the Army staff. And the conversation came up about mentoring Blacks. And he said, yeah. He said, we got a problem. He said, I've noticed in my travels that a lot of Black officers and a white officer come to the unit at the same time. The white officer will get this job, the Black officer will get this job. And he said, a couple of times I've asked, why has that happened? And he said, the answer I get is, well, we want to look at him for a while. And I'm thinking like he's a plant. You plant a pot, you pot a plant and watch it grow. Okay. And he said a couple more things. So during this discussion, I put my hand up. And when I put my hand up, I could hear from the crowd. And I said, sir, Remo Butler, I said, glad that you saw these things, but since you were in this position and you saw these things actually happen, what did you do about them? Because he was in a position to do something. He started stuttering and, I saw it, and there was not an answer. There was no, yes, I saw that. I went back, talked to the Chief of Staff of the Army and the G1 of the Army, blah, 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 and said, we got an issue. He never said that. And after the meeting was over, we're leaving, and he was out front, and he grabbed my hand, looked me in my eye, shook it real hard. He said, did I answer your question? And I looked at him and I said, yes, sir. He didn't want to touch the question.
Yeah.
Because he saw it was a problem, but it wasn't something they wanted to do. So, you look at things, why does this happen? Well, again, it's that old mindset. He's Black, he's not as smart as me. He's Black, he's not motivated as me, whatever. But some people still have that in their system. They just won't take two officers come in and say, okay, you're going to be the S3 and you're going to be the S whatever. You know, he'll kind of look and do that skin tone check. That's one of the things that probably still goes on.
Well, let
The
me
other
ask
one
you a
is,
question, sir. And
yeah,
I'm sorry. What about, let me ask you a question. Please cover this if you don't mind.
yeah.
You're talking about things that may be happening even now.
I'm not maybe. Don't say maybe. So I am.
With
the
the
reason
NFL coaches. What do you,
yeah,
when you, I'm listening to your career,
yeah,
and I want you to continue with your thought, but what are you thinking, like even like NFL guys are not, black guys are not being head coaches?
listen, Ray Charles could see that because Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator. Brian Leftwich, offensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator of 2 teams that won Super Bowls. They haven't gone anywhere. The defensive coordinator for the Bucks, not gone anywhere. Last year, you know, they were pulling coaches out of college. They were taking, you know, Mike and the Rutabaggers to be the coach. Why? You know, for a long time, remember, they thought blacks weren't smart enough to be quarterback or middle linebacker. Once they found out, whoa, we can't get enough of this. You know, now, you know, I'd like to see Joe Burrow out there because Joe Burrow is a white quarterback who plays like Lamar Jackson. You know, he plays like Mahomes. He plays like Kyler Murray. Yeah. So what are you going to say now, fellas? You know, he does all those things. And yes, there was another paper written a couple years ago by another colonel in the War College. And I think that he wrote it, it was 20 years after my paper, something like that. And the statistics for promotion and everything for blacks are still the same. There might be a percentage point different, but basically it's still the same. Nothing has changed. But on the good side, after I wrote the paper, I got a lot of calls from white officers, especially when I say you got to interface with the black officers. Question was how? How do we do that? They didn't know. And I told them, and I told them based on experience. When I was a company commander, I had 2 black second lieutenants come into the unit. One came to my unit, the other went to another unit. And we were all of the same fraternity. So they kind of looked to me. So there would be unit parties. You know, the battalion has a party. All of the black officers would be here, all 4 of them. There was never any walk around, you know, let me get to know these other people. The other folks didn't walk around and say, let me get to know these guys. Well, and I bring them in and I say, let me tell you something, fellas. When you go to one of these things, it's a networking organization. You got to get to know who your peers are. You get to know who the staff are. I said, because these are the guys who are going to recommend you for your next job. If they don't know you, they can't recommend you for their next job. So get out of that corner where you feel comfortable, you know, talking to, you know, Laquan and Tyrone. Go over here and talk to Bill, Mark, and John. Right. And I would force them. I'd say, break it up. But everybody can't walk in and do that. If the white commander went and said, break it up, you know, it'd be charges. But I could walk in and say, hey, you need to go out there and socialize and get to learn something. You know, and that's a hard thing. And that's one of the reasons I tell people, they say, well, why are there so few blacks in SF? And I say, because there are so few blacks in SF. You know, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, well, I know a lot of black people like to go places where there's somebody that looks like them. You know, I would step out there when nobody looked like me. I mean, if I had $1 for every meeting I had been to when nobody there looked like me, I could buy me a case of Yingling easily. But I relished that situation because I wanted to teach you about me. The other thing is, you know, food and drinks are a powerful thing. You were on a team, you know, and I ain't gonna ask you how many times you and your team went out drinking together, or how many times you and your team and their wives went out to dinner somewhere. Right. That's when you really get to know and understand people. Right. You know, me and like I said, the best man at my wedding and another friend of mine who has one of the most diverse companies that I've been around. I tell him that all the time. And, you know, I say to him, you know, this, he said, why is that? I said, you go to your people's houses for dinner. They know you. You know them on a personal level. You know who their kids' names are, you know, and you got to explain that to people. You know, when you sit down and break bread with someone, you learn them on a different level, you know, rather than at work. Hey, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? How are your kids? I saw one of them did this in football. Yeah, did great. You don't know that person. You have to actually get to know them. And if me and you are sitting around eating together, we're gonna get to know each other. If we're sitting around drinking rum and cokes like they're doing seventh group together, we're gonna get to know each other a little better. Now, if me and you are eating and drinking and our wives are sitting at the same table, guess what? We're all gonna learn a little bit about each other. And to me, that's the way forward. You know, there's a lot of talk about diversity and diversity training. I think we need to relook how we do diversity training. And
Okay.
instead of saying diversity training, you know, we might say diversity living. You know, because what I just said are things that most people don't realize. You know, just because you work with 6 Black people, don't know you understand Black people. You know, that's why a lot of white guys get in trouble using the N-word. You know, well, I heard Smuckatella use it and I heard him use it. Yeah, you did, but that doesn't give you a license to use it. You know, one of the things I'd love to do would be able to take something like this, my background and my experience, and share it with the commissioner of the NFL and some of the owners. You know, shoot, that for me, that would be, I could say I've lived life to the fullest, because they don't understand that concept. Now, Flores' interview, you know, he basically says that these guys, we don't know these guys. These are old white millionaires. You know, I don't know them and they don't know me. You know, but okay, how do we get to know each other? You know, as an NFL, why don't we have a league night out where the owners are there, some of the head coaches are there, and some of the potential guys, you know, offensive coordinators and these kind of guys are there, where they can have an actual sit down, let's eat some lickies and chewies and drink some liquor together and learn each other on a different level. You know, now I always tell people it's harder to screw over somebody that you know than that you don't know. You know, if we have a situation like this, one of those owners, maybe 2 or 3 of them are going to get to say, man, you know, I didn't realize that guy was that smart, or like they do me. Right. I didn't realize he was that articulate.
Well, sir, what you're saying right now is what I've said for years. I mean, you know, both of us have the same background. You know, I came to SF through the Ranger Battalion and a couple of years there. And I always tell people that I meet, I say, I'm very used to being the only Black guy in the company, in the room. Yeah. I'm very comfortable. And
it gives you the opportunity to excel, because you know everybody's looking at you.
Right.
You know that. What's Ranger Johnson going to do? You know, what's he going to do? Right. You know, how's he going to handle this? They're looking at that. You know, when you're a team sergeant, they looked at it. You know, you were one of the few team sergeants that I never had dates about.
Yeah.
You know, your team guys loved you. Why? You were always leading from the front. You were always beating them up in PT.
Yeah.
You know, they respected that. Right. You know, they had a lot of respect for you for that. And, you know, consequently, that flows down. That's how they think. Now they're talking to their kids, you know, and now they're not going to say, oh, Sergeant Johnson, that N-word. You know, they're saying, oh, man, Sergeant Johnson beat me up today at PT. You know, they relate to that and they understand that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you know, you brought up 2 guys that were instrumental in my career, you know, Sergeant Major Henry Bone and Sergeant Major Rambo. They picked me out and selected me to do a pre-Ranger course in 7 Special Forces group to help guys through Ranger school. Because they saw that, and there's many guys that were Ranger qualified. And why did they call? You know, Sergeant Major Henry Bone called me up to his office and said, you know, I need you to do this. You know, when, you know, because of that, and yeah, the things that you talk about just, I mean, you're such a competitor, sir, and just that leading edge of wanting to be on top, and then not just wanting to, but having that passion to lead. What would you say, man, and these young people that we're trying to communicate with today, and just so they get that edge that you still have to this day?
Well, let me tell you about that edge, and you're absolutely right. I still have it to this day. I still like to mentor. I still like to work. I still work out, and I still stay in shape. And you know, I always say I just want to be in shape so I can drop you at one punch. But you can't force that on somebody that don't want to do it. Number one, the first thing is you got to be a leader. You know, the military has more leadership schools than Carter got liver pills, but that doesn't make everybody a leader. You have to want to be a leader. And that's one thing I instill in my son. My son plays basketball. Right. And, you know, he's big. Of course, he's my son. But anyway, he's big, he's good. And I always tell him, I said, little B, you got to exert yourself. You know, when you get open, you got to put your hand up and say, ball, you know, and people will respond to that. And I said, now, once you get that ball, you got to score. You know, so I'm pushing him at age 11 and 12 to be a leader. there's so many people who are happy to sit back and ride. You know, oh, I made it through the Q course. I'm on a team. You know, I'm a good weapons man. I'm a good medic. I'm a good whatever. And I'm gonna put this in and see where it goes. And there are other people who say, yeah, I made it to a team. I want to be a team sergeant next. You know, and that shows on people on the team that, hey, this guy wants to be a team sergeant one day, or this guy's happy being, you know, E6 or E7, whatever he is. You know, that's something, and that's that inner drive and self-startedness that I keep talking about all the time. You got to start yourself. Nobody pushed you to go to Ranger School. You probably were discouraged from going to Ranger School. I know people said to you, Johnson, you're a pretty big guy. Can you swim?
Right.
Yeah, I know. What I went through, you know, I got the same thing.
Right. Yes, sir. I mean, it's amazing because the value you bring to the table. I mean, you're right. If you know, being more relational with more people, and one of the things that I learned in, you know, special forces is, like you said, relationships. I agree with you, General Butler. The military does have its issues. One thing I've always said, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. During my 20-year military career, I always felt I had just as much an opportunity to get promoted as the white guy. As a matter of fact, I never felt that I couldn't compete or get promoted. And that's why when I looked at the NFL situation, I was telling the guy the other day, I said, I don't understand that. I said, we all come up together. You start playing pee-wee football. You go to middle school. You go to junior high. You go to high school. You play in college together. You play pro football together. Then why all of a sudden, when you make it to pro football coaching, all of a sudden this man is going to get an opportunity that you never get, and y'all came up in the same system. It's mind-boggling to me.
Well, let's take that back a little bit. Let's take that back to quarterbacks. You know, you remember Jimmy Harris? Played for, I think, Chicago Bears. He was one of the first black quarterbacks around.
Yeah, it was before my time, but you get.
Yeah, Doug Williams.
Doug, yes,
you know,
Doug.
These guys, you know, and they had to fight to get their positions because they want to draft them and say, oh, we're going to make you a wide receiver. Nope, I'm going to play quarterback or I ain't playing. You know, it's that ingrained feeling that I'm superior to you. You don't have the same mind or mental capability that I do. And it's sad, in 2022, there are people who still have that mindset. And the only way they're going to change that mindset is get to know people who have been, who are successful and want to be more successful. And see, that's the part that's missing. That's why I'd love an opportunity to sit down with Roger Goodell and some of his owners and stuff and say, let me explain this to you, fellas. It's real easy. This is how you can make this work.
Wow. I'm going to let my son ask you one of the final questions. And man, it's been wonderful talking to you, sir.
Man, you know, I can't wait till we share this interview, and I want to go ahead and put this out there soon because, you know, you are saying some stuff that are relevant and current right now, sir. And so I appreciate your just sharing your story, sharing that desire, that importance of really living and having real relationships. I feel like in our society right now, like you said, it's tough. People are really separated, and even more now so probably in a lot of ways than it has been because of technology and people really connecting online. So there's a lot of challenges there. And I think that that's so important to really connect a real relationship. So, you know, I think you've already just done amazing things. You've like you're saying, you're doing amazing things. You're mentoring people. You're raising up an amazing son there to do some amazing stuff as he grows up. And you know, the final question we always ask is, you know, when everything is said and done, you know, what do you want to be remembered for? What kind of legacy do you want to make? And I feel like
my first thing I want to be, my legacy to be, is I was a great father for my son. Yeah, you know, that's the first right here. That's the first thing I want to be, because this is my legacy right here. Right. You know, I want to be remembered as a great father, you know, because I teach my son. You know, I've taught my son finances. I've taught my son by having a work ethic. I've taught my son money management. And remember, he's just turned 12. So he has a lot of adult type mentality, you know, that he takes through life. You know, and I tell him all the time, you know, he knows how to cook. You know, he can make some eggs and bacon, I mean, like nobody can. He can make pancakes, waffles. He's learning to work with me on the grill. You know, he's doing life things, and that's critical for him. And so when he gets old, you know, he's not going to be dependent on nobody. You know, one of the things I got to teach him coming up now, because he's getting big and greasy, is how to sew. You know, my mama taught me how to sew when I was his age. There ain't nothing feminine about it. It's something you got to do, because when you're getting ready to go somewhere and that button pop off, you know, you find that sewing kit and you take them 5 minutes, put it back on, and you're ready to roll again. But these are
Right.
things, you know, that it's my job, my responsibility to teach him about being a man.
Wow.
Militarily, I want to be remembered as a mentor and a good leader. That's it.
Wow.
You know, and also I want to be remembered for having always led from the front. You can't lead from the back. You got to be out front.
Yes,
That's
sir.
right.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
Man, you know, you're doing amazing things. Definitely, Lil B, you got an amazing father who's really pouring a lot into you. So that's really awesome.
Well,
Man,
I just want to say, you know, thanks to you guys for the opportunity to do this.
yeah,
It was great. And I enjoy doing these things because the things I say, they can't help me.
yeah,
They'll be able to help my son, and they'll be able to help some of the other viewers out there who are stuck. You know, one thing I want to say about my paper, when I wrote my paper, believe it or not, I got more phone calls from white senior officers than black.
wow.
Now, some of those calls were, you know, you really believe that? That's not true. Yeah, yes, it is true. But a lot of those calls, the majority of them were, can you help me? Can you tell me how to? It was very simple, you know, and I told the guy, I said, you know, I used to, you know, have these guys come over, and I'd invite them over to the house, and I'd invite an equal number of other lieutenants, you know, and their families. So these guys learned how to communicate with people across the racial divide. You know, and that's a big thing. You got to get to know people.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for
Appreciate you
sharing.
guys having me on. And
Yeah.
like I say, always here to help.
Thank you, sir. Man, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate you being on with us. And man, I'm honored to have this conversation going. I want to keep it going. I feel like we can talk. I want to hear you just talk for hours, honestly.
We could, but I want, when you do, just send me the link where my son can tune in and to the podcast and send this or
Will
save
do.
it. Howard. Yeah. Thanks so much, guys.
Hold on,
Ranger
sir.
Johnson, I'll at you
Hold on,
later.
sir.
Take care.
Hold on,
Cheers.
sir. Let me finish it
Oh.
off like this here. I'm gonna finish it off, son.
Go for
I
it.
always like to finish the calls off like this. We just had a great American hero, General Remo Butler, and his son, Little B, on the call. And let me tell you, he's one of my heroes that I have love, honor, and respect for. And I've known this man for over 3 decades. But this is Ranger Johnson. I got to finish the call off like this, telling you to stay in the fight.